He said it like it was a small favor, like a weather report. "We only want important people," Austin Palmer said, smiling in my living room as if the light itself belonged to him. 11 words. One evening. The start of a storm. I lifted my coffee but didn't drink. I'd been a contractor long enough to keep my temper in the toolbox. Sterling Construction was my life, 30 years of projects, payrolls, and promises. I'd raised Elena on overtime shifts and storybooks. Tonight I watched my daughter stand between us, love in her eyes and shame in the set of her mouth as her fiancé redrew our history into something small and tidy. He suggested the guest list be selective. He implied my friends wouldn't fit the crowd. He handed me a card for a tailor, as if new collars could hide who I'd been. Each line, cut like sandpaper. The Westchester Country Club walkthrough replayed in my head. Planners polite, smiles thin. A seating chart that pushed me to table 12. Important people, he called them. My crew were loyal, but in his vocabulary, they weren't people who mattered. Most men would have swallowed the insult. I didn't, because I understood leverage. Sterling Construction hadn't merely poured concrete. We'd woven a web. Country club boards, hotel managers, municipal inspectors, people who'd seen us deliver on impossible schedules owed me small debts and quiet favors. Those are currencies you don't flaunt, the ones that answer phones at 3 a.m. when a crisis arrives. So I listened to Austin brag about judges, senators, and law partners. He explained what mattered in Westchester and why my background wasn't the right fit. He didn't know he was cataloging his own weaknesses. Rumors reached me about Palmer Investment Group, odd transfers, missing client funds, talk of gambling. Rumor alone is dangerous. Verified, it's a fuse. That Friday, while Elena and Austin argued about napkin colors and which relatives counted as important, I started quietly collecting proof, my records and Marcus Webb's findings. A transfer here, a canceled client account there. Small anomalies became a pattern. If Austin had been stealing to fund a habit behind his polished image, the ledger would show it. If he was building a life on other people's money, I would let daylight through. At the same time, I used a different kind of leverage. Relationships nurtured over decades. I made calls that sounded casual. Family emergency. Can you accommodate a cancellation? A country club president who owed me from a renovation. A hotel manager whose lobby we'd restored after storms. Men and women I'd helped when times were hard. Answered without drama. Venues opened up. Bookings dissolved. I wasn't trying to ruin a wedding for spite. I wanted consequences for a man who dismissed my dignity while hiding uglier habits. I wanted truth to meet the ceremony so Elena could see what she nearly stepped into. The plan wasn't theatrical. It was surgical. Cancellations, documentation, exposure, all timed so Austin's image would meet the evidence publicly. By dawn Friday, 2 tracks were moving. One quietly undid Austin's logistics bookings, backups, deposits. The other compiled a dossier suggesting a serious problem. Client money moving oddly. Both were quiet, methodical, leaving room for deniability until the moment of revelation. At 7:30 a.m., my phone buzzed on the workbench. Austin's name lit the screen. He wanted to clear the air. I hit record before I answered. He had no idea the next words he spoke would hand me the map to his undoing. What followed would be a lesson in power, reputation, and the cost of pretending publicly. Saturday morning arrived, charged and cold. The county seemed to hold its breath. I wasn't naive. This fight would happen where reputation lives, in public. Marcus had delivered airtight evidence packs, bank statements, casino slips, client complaints, clean, judicially precise. News vans ringed the house like predators. Reporters paced, cameras warmed, microphones extended. Elena met me at the patio, wedding dress in hand, eyes hard with resolve. "Ready?" she asked. "Yes," I said. We walked to the small stage she'd hastily arranged and asked for everyone's attention. She spoke plainly, without theatrics, and the room listened. She told the truth about Austin. Retirement accounts emptied, scholarship funds wired away, medical savings stolen to feed a gambling habit. Murmurs grew into stunned silence. Faces that had sipped champagne the night before now paled. We began to hand out the files. Reporters hunched over bank ledgers. Social media ignited. The narrative flipped overnight. The story became an alleged embezzlement. The front rows reserved for old money friends shifted, confused and awkward, while my crew and longtime neighbors stood quietly in the back, wearing borrowed suits and steadfast loyalty. Victims came forward. An elderly woman held her bank printout with trembling fingers. A grandfather showed the scholarship fund that had vanished. Their voices weren't dramatic, which made the betrayal feel raw and real. Cameras magnified ordinary faces and ordinary losses into proof that cut through polished denials. Austin tried to speak, charm slick as oil, but records don't blink. He attempted the old lines, misunderstanding, accounting errors, smear campaign, but time-stamped transfers and casino receipts have no sympathy. The Palmer table grew thin as guests shifted away. Influence, once a shield, felt porous under documentary assault. By mid-afternoon, journalists were calling federal contacts. Marcus passed dossiers to reporters who promised to forward them to prosecutors. The county paper asked for corroboration. I realized we'd moved beyond family scandal. We'd become a case. That realization felt heavy and right. Mrs. Palmer raged on social platforms and threatened legal action, but subpoenas and bank reconciliations laugh at bluster. We had the paperwork. When whispers of a federal inquiry reached the garden, panic flickered across Austin's face. This was the man lecturing others about status. Now he looked unmoored. That evening, Margaret Richards, Marcus, and I planned the legal sequence: freeze orders, formal filings, witness lists, forensic accounting. We prepared victim outreach and organized statements from vendors and clients who had been wronged. Dozens of small business owners who'd worked with Sterling Construction for years volunteered testimony. Loyalty built on decades of fair dealing was now a resource. As dusk settled, Elena and I walked between the hedges. She was tired but steady. I looked at the stack of folders, the mounting media presence, the victim's finding voice, and answered, "We did what was necessary. Truth needed a platform." Justice isn't a single blow. It's a slow machine that needs evidence, witnesses, and persistence. Tonight, we supplied the gears. Tomorrow, prosecutors would begin pulling the levers. For the first time in months, the silence that had protected greed was broken. The so-called important people were starting to look very ordinary. Just before midnight, my phone rang. Marcus's voice was sharp. A tip had reached federal agents, and they were moving faster than expected. A raid could occur at dawn. We triple-checked evidence, finalized witness lists, and warned victims to be ready. Sleep became impossible. Dawn would bring subpoenas, agents, and questions that no amount of social polish could answer. We braced for the moment justice arrived. Dawn arrived thin and gray. Marcus called at 5:20 a.m. Agents were mobilizing. I dressed fast, grabbed folders, and drove to the Sterling estate, while Elena and Margaret Richards gathered witness statements. By 6 a.m., black SUVs threaded our drive. Federal agents moved with clinical calm. Badges flashed. Warrants read. The Palmer estate became a crime scene. Servers disconnected. Ledgers boxed. Paper trails seized. Men who prized image were propelled into procedural reality. I felt no glee, only a steady sense that a wrong had met consequence. News vans swarmed. Cameras framed the palatial facade. Austin's mother stood at the gate, furious and stunned. I answered one local reporter. "Justice needs facts. We supplied some." My calm made the clip sticky. People would replay it. Agents found transfers, casino receipts, forged client authorizations. A dry ledger showed wire transfers timed to poker tournaments, small sums aggregated into massive holes in retirees' accounts. The brutality of it made my hands shake. People had trusted him. He'd gambled their futures away. Austin called from a blocked number, voice thin. "Vic, please, we can fix this privately," he begged, then threatened. I listened, then said, "You made your choices. Let the law decide." Social media erupted. At first, his circle defended him, calling me ruthless. But facts shift perception. 2 clients went on camera describing vanished savings. The balance tipped. Friends who had prepared to judge now scrolled through bank records and casino logs. At noon, lawyers met with prosecutors. We filed motions to protect victims' accounts and coordinated outreach. Margaret handed me a victim list. Names, phones, short statements. Justice, I realized, wasn't only punitive, it was repair. Sterling Construction would create a victim assistance fund. I assigned Elena to lead outreach. She accepted with a steadiness that made me proud. By evening, the Palmer social fortress felt hollow. Board members distanced themselves. Club seats emptied. The veneer of respectability peeled back. Respect, without ethics, proved brittle. That night, Elena and I ate takeout at the kitchen table and watched raid footage. Austin, led away, looked smaller than his staged persona. Elena murmured, "He could have been different." I agreed. A twist arrived the next morning. A cease and desist from a firm representing Palmer allies, accusing me of defamation. Privilege fights back with lawyers. I forwarded the letter to Margaret and smiled. Let them file. We had evidence. They had spin. Community response mattered more than threats. Shop owners, elderly victims, and former employees came forward with stories and records confirming Sterling's long record of integrity. Local reporting shifted from rumor to documented truth. The important people, ordinary citizens, who paid taxes, ran shops, taught in classrooms, and checked on neighbors. But the legal fight wasn't over. Federal indictments loomed. Courtroom battles would stretch months. We'd won the first round. Truth and public accountability. The next rounds would be paperwork, depositions, and strategy. Stakes remained high not just for Austin, but for everyone who trusted him. Late that week, a headline appeared. Investment manager charged. Client funds missing. Photos of Austin in handcuffs filled the feed. Elena called, voice tight. "Dad, is it really done?" "Not yet," I said. We had set a sequence in motion that would reshape lives. It wasn't petty revenge. It was a reclamation of dignity for those robbed. A lesson about where real influence comes from. Steady work, honest relationships, and the courage to act when something is wrong. Tomorrow would bring court dates and difficult testimony, but tonight we slept with the knowledge that truth, finally, had begun its work and healing. Saturday evening settled into a brittle calm. Garden lights blinked on, illuminating chairs that had once been arranged for celebration and now held witnesses. Reporters lingered, but their questions felt smaller, given what had already come to light. Inside, Elena and I prepared for a press conference that would make our case public, not for revenge, but for victims. The crowd assembled. Elderly clients clutching bank statements, neighbors who'd watched Sterling cruise at dawn, vendors who'd been paid on time for years, and a few foremen in ties. Not important by pedigree, but their presence carried weight no inherited name could buy. Each face told a story of trust betrayed and of the quiet labor that built this community. I opened with a simple truth. For 30 years, Sterling Construction has done honest work. Today we stand with families cheated out of savings. We will help make them whole. Elena read 3 short testimonies that made the room lean in. Cameras panned. The narrative shifted from scandal to human harm. Questions came fast. Why now? Was this personal? Had I orchestrated the cancellations? I answered plainly. Evidence led to action. We reported it. Facts, not fury, steered the conversation. Anger grabs attention, but documented truth wins hearts. By midweek, old alliances frayed. Politicians issued careful statements. Club boards reviewed memberships. Invitations were quietly rescinded. Reputation wilted under the weight of subpoenas and bank records. The legal machinery moved. Grand juries convened, subpoenas issued, protective orders filed. We organized support. Sterling established a legal fund for victims and temporary financial assistance. Our accountants constructed restitution schedules and compiled documentation. Prosecutors welcomed victim statements. Evidence packets grew thick and methodical. At home, Elena faced wreckage, not just a ruined wedding, but a betrayed future. She transformed humiliation into action, leading outreach, calling families, helping fill out forms. Watching her, I saw resilience that had been masked by social climbing. The daughter who once clung to bedtime stories became someone who steadied frightened seniors. Old money countered with PR, sympathetic op-eds, hints that I'd waged a vendetta. Their spin clanged against bank records and witness testimony. Meanwhile, neighbors brought casseroles, union leaders offered job training, community volunteers set up clinics. The real currency, trust and reciprocity, reasserted itself. Margaret Palmer requested a private meeting. She arrived composed, papers in hand, offering a discreet settlement. Silence for a donation and a retraction. It was a test. Optics over accountability. I declined. Some wounds required daylight. Indictments followed. Austin's lawyers pushed delays and attacked witnesses. Each delay cost victims time and peace. We resisted with paperwork and persistence, ensuring records remained visible and accessible. Justice moves in miles and inches, but it moves. Before a major hearing, I walked a job site where a new apartment block rose from concrete and rebar. Men waved from scaffolding. The frame gleamed like a promise. I thought about legacy, not a headline or a social cachet, but structures that shelter families and create livelihoods. The courthouse would be noisy and ugly. The defense would try to muddy truth with theatrics. But our case was organized. Bank transfers, client statements, casino records, timestamps. When the trial began, clarity would cut through PR noise. In the end, the community would read the ledger and decide which kind of people matter, those who build and protect, or those who profit by preying on trust. And when the verdict comes, it won't be about wealth or titles. It will be about choices. The ledger is a moral map. Every transfer is an answer. People will remember who sheltered them, who stood with them, and who abandoned them for illusions. The trial opened on a humid Tuesday, and the courthouse felt heavy with expectation. Victims sat in the front row, elderly clients, working families, people stripped of savings. Opening statements were clinical, but the story that emerged felt intimate. Wire transfers, timestamps, casino receipts, and the faces of those who had trusted Austin. Witness after witness described the same pattern. A friendly advisor who promised safety, then transfers that appeared legitimate until they didn't. Mrs. Hoffman spoke slowly about the shock of seeing $180,000 vanish. She described choosing between medication and food. Those human details made the ledgers unbearable. The defense tried to reframe everything as poor decisions and miscommunication, but the timeline was relentless. Each deposit had a purpose, covering losses, feeding a gambling habit, maintaining a lifestyle until the paper trail closed the gap between appetite and crime. The jury saw deliberate concealment and repeated acts. Press coverage exploded. For a week, the city debated entitlement and accountability. Social feeds that had once cheered Austin's charm cataloged victims' names and dates. The community's response shifted when people read the bank records next to stories of loss. Sympathy moved toward the betrayed. On verdict day, the jury's faces were tired but resolved. Guilty. The words landed like thunder. Austin's composure crumbled. Months later, the judge sentenced him to prison, restitution, and asset freezes. The penalties could not unmake the harm, but they were a concrete measure of consequence. After the legal fight, our focus turned to repair. Sterling Construction established a victim fund, providing emergency grants to cover immediate needs, medical bills, rent, therapy. We partnered with counselors to run workshops, teaching seniors how to recognize fraud and protect accounts. Elena led outreach, turning betrayal into action. She became a voice for prevention, meeting survivors and learning from them. The Palmer name faded from gala invitations to news clippings about indictments. Reputation evaporated faster than money when truth spread. Meanwhile, local leaders and small business owners began telling a different story, one about steady work, fair wages, and commitments fulfilled. Those quieter narratives regained prominence. Elena stayed with the company. She accepted a role in community relations focused on rebuilding trust. She met Mrs. Hoffman and others face to face, arranging medical support, facilitating access to services, and establishing a scholarship to help families recover. Her leadership changed the company culture. Where entitlement lingered, accountability grew. Weeks later, at a ribbon cutting for affordable housing, a community leader said, "Trust isn't inherited, it's earned." The crowd applauded. The day's joy, children playing, neighbors greeting one another, felt like the true outcome. People sometimes ask if I felt vindictive. The answer is no. I felt relief and a deep responsibility. Justice was necessary, but the deeper work was restoration, helping victims, teaching prevention, and ensuring the next generation learned that dignity matters more than appearances. Elena's transformation from a bride estranged by arrogance to a leader grounded in service was the real story. If there is a moral, it's not about social rank. It's about consistent, honest work and the importance of teaching gratitude. The people who matter are those who show up, who keep their word, and who stand by their neighbors when trust is broken. In the end, that truth repaired more than a wedding ever could. Months later, Austin began serving a multi-year sentence that reflected the scale of harm. Courts ordered restitution and forfeiture of assets, though many wounds remained. Community meetings continued, and Sterling's fund dispersed emergency grants within weeks. Elena launched a free financial clinic at the community center, where volunteers taught seniors to read statements, set safeguards, and reclaim confidence. Healing is slow, but steady, and resilience